What if the kindest person you have ever known suddenly stopped explaining, stopped chasing, stopped forgiving every wound, and simply walked away? Most people would call it coldness, but in reality it is often the final stage of awakening. An empath does not stop caring in a single moment. There is no dramatic decision, no sudden loss of compassion, and no instant transformation. Human psychology reveals that this change happens slowly, almost invisibly. It begins after years of carrying burdens that were never theirs, absorbing other people's pain, forgiving repeated betrayals, and believing that if they loved enough, sacrificed enough, or understood enough, everyone around them would eventually change. But life has a way of teaching lessons that kindness alone cannot overcome. For a long time, the empath mistakes endurance for love. They continue giving chances long after respect has disappeared. They remain loyal to people who repeatedly choose convenience over honesty. They silence their own needs to keep relationships alive, believing that protecting everyone else's peace is more important than protecting their own. They become experts at understanding everyone except themselves. The world often praises this behavior. People admire the empath's patience, generosity, and willingness to forgive. Yet behind that admiration, something dangerous quietly develops. Every time the empath ignores their own boundaries, they send themselves the same message: my needs matter less. Over time, this silent belief becomes emotional exhaustion, not because they lack love, but because they have been pouring from a cup that no one allowed to refill. Human psychology teaches that every person has a breaking point, not where they become cruel, but where clarity finally replaces illusion. One day, the empath realizes something that changes everything. They understand that no amount of love can heal someone who refuses responsibility. No amount of patience can change a person committed to repeating the same patterns. No amount of sacrifice can build a healthy relationship if respect only exists on one side. This realization is painful because it forces the empath to let go of an identity they have carried for years. They were the one who always stayed, the one who always understood, the one who always made excuses for everyone else's behavior. But awakening demands something different. It asks them to show the same compassion toward themselves that they have so freely given to others. To those who benefited from the empath's endless giving, this transformation often looks shocking. They ask, "Why have you changed?" They accuse the empath of becoming distant, selfish, or cold. What they fail to see is that the empath has not stopped caring. They have simply stopped abandoning themselves. Their silence is no longer a sign of weakness. It is a sign that they have finally learned the value of their own peace. Imagine a candle that has spent years lighting every room around it, while slowly burning itself away. Eventually the flame grows weaker, not because it hates the darkness, but because it has nothing left to give. Wisdom is realizing that the candle must first protect its own flame before it can illuminate anyone else's path. The final stage of awakening is not the death of compassion. It is the birth of discernment. The empath still loves deeply, still cares sincerely, and still believes in kindness. But now those gifts are offered with wisdom instead of guilt, with balance instead of self-sacrifice, and with self-respect instead of fear of losing people. Because the day an empath stops chasing everyone else is the day they finally begin finding themselves. After an empath begins to rediscover their own worth, another painful truth slowly comes into focus. They realize that not everyone loved them for who they were. Many loved them for what they consistently gave. This is one of the most difficult lessons in human psychology, because it forces a person to separate genuine connection from quiet dependence. For years, the empath believed they were valued for their heart. Only later do they discover that, in some relationships, their endless patience, forgiveness, emotional support, and willingness to sacrifice had become the real attraction. An empath naturally wants to understand people. They listen without judgment, forgive mistakes, and offer comfort when others are hurting. These qualities are beautiful when they exist within healthy relationships, but they can also attract individuals who are looking for someone to carry responsibilities they refuse to carry themselves. Instead of growing stronger, these people become comfortable relying on the empath's endless compassion. What begins as kindness slowly turns into expectation. Human psychology explains why this happens. People often repeat behaviors that continue to benefit them. If someone discovers they can repeatedly disappoint you and still receive unlimited forgiveness, they have little reason to change. If they know you will always fix the problems, calm every conflict, and carry every emotional burden, they may unconsciously stop taking responsibility for themselves. Without realizing it, the empath becomes the emotional foundation of a relationship that is no longer built on equality. The painful part is that the empath rarely notices this imbalance in the beginning. They believe love means giving more, understanding more, and enduring more. Every sacrifice feels noble because it comes from compassion. But over time, they begin feeling exhausted without understanding why. They give endlessly, yet feel increasingly unseen. They support everyone else's healing while quietly neglecting their own. Their kindness remains appreciated, but their own emotional needs slowly disappear from the relationship. Imagine a tree that provides shade, fruit, and shelter to everyone who comes near it. People gather beneath its branches every day, grateful for everything it offers. But very few stop to ask whether the tree itself has enough water to survive. Eventually, even the strongest tree begins to weaken if it continues giving without receiving the care it also deserves. In much the same way, an empath cannot continue pouring into others while remaining empty inside. This realization is not meant to create bitterness. It is meant to create wisdom. The empath begins understanding that healthy love is never one-sided. Genuine relationships are built upon mutual respect, shared responsibility, and equal care. True connection allows both people to grow instead of requiring one person to endlessly sacrifice for the other. Love should never demand the loss of your identity as proof of your devotion. As this awareness grows, the empath no longer measures relationships by how much they can give. Instead, they begin asking deeper questions. Is there mutual respect? Is there honesty? Is there accountability? Do both people protect each other's peace? These questions transform the way they love, because they stop confusing self-sacrifice with genuine connection. The awakening does not make the empath less compassionate. It simply teaches them that kindness without discernment invites exploitation, while kindness guided by wisdom creates relationships where both people are free to grow. Because the people who truly value your heart will never expect you to lose yourself just to keep them in your life. After realizing that love should never require the loss of your identity, the empath reaches the turning point that changes everything. It is the moment when boundaries begin to replace guilt. This is where true awakening starts. Human psychology teaches that people who have spent years putting everyone else first often feel uncomfortable the first time they choose themselves. They have been conditioned to believe that saying no is selfish, that protecting their peace is wrong, and that their value depends on how much they sacrifice. But awakening quietly destroys these illusions. For most of their life, the empath says yes even when every part of them wants to say no. They agree to things that drain their energy, tolerate behavior that wounds their spirit, and remain in relationships that no longer bring peace. Not because they are weak, but because they fear hurting others more than they fear hurting themselves. Every time they ignore their own needs, they convince themselves it is an act of love. Yet over time, that constant self-denial becomes emotional exhaustion. One day, something inside begins to change. The empath realizes that protecting everyone else's happiness has cost them their own. They begin asking a question they had avoided for years. Who is protecting me? The answer is often painful. They discover that while they have spent years rescuing others, very few people have ever shown the same commitment to protecting their peace. This realization does not create anger. It creates clarity. Human psychology reveals that boundaries are uncomfortable only for those who benefited from their absence. The moment the empath begins saying no, certain relationships immediately change. People who once praised their kindness suddenly accuse them of being selfish. Those who enjoyed unlimited access to their time and emotions become frustrated when that access is no longer available. It feels confusing at first because the empath expects love to grow stronger through honesty. Instead, they discover that some relationships were never built on mutual respect. They were built on unlimited availability. Imagine a beautiful garden without a fence. Anyone can walk inside, step on the flowers, take what they want and leave without consequence. The problem is not the beauty of the garden. The problem is the absence of protection. Boundaries function like that fence. They do not exist to keep love away. They exist to preserve what is valuable. Without them, even the most beautiful heart becomes vulnerable to people who mistake kindness for permission. The empath slowly learns that every healthy relationship naturally respects limits. A person who truly loves you does not become angry because you need rest. They do not punish you for choosing peace. They do not guilt you into abandoning your own well-being for their comfort. Genuine love honors freedom. It understands that two whole people create a stronger relationship than one person constantly sacrificing themselves for the other. As this understanding grows, guilt begins losing its power. The empath no longer apologizes for protecting their energy. They stop explaining every boundary in hopes that everyone will approve. They realize that their responsibility is not to keep every person happy. Their responsibility is to remain faithful to their values while treating others with kindness and respect. This is the moment where emotional survival transforms into emotional freedom. The empath still loves deeply, still gives sincerely, and still believes in compassion. But now their heart is guided by wisdom instead of fear. They understand that saying no to disrespect is actually saying yes to a healthier life, because the day an empath stops feeling guilty for protecting their peace is the day they finally begin living in it. As the empath learns to protect their peace, another transformation begins to take place, one that most people completely misunderstand. From the outside, it looks as though they have become cold, distant, or uncaring. Friends may whisper that they have changed. Family members may say they are no longer the same person. Those who once depended on their endless patience may even accuse them of becoming selfish. But the truth is far different. The empath has not become heartless. They have become emotionally mature. Human psychology often confuses detachment with a lack of love. Because many people have never experienced healthy emotional boundaries, they believe that loving someone means carrying their problems, fixing their mistakes, and sacrificing your own well-being to keep them comfortable. But this belief quietly destroys the very person who continues giving without limits. Emotional maturity begins the moment the empath understands that compassion does not require self-destruction. For years, the empath carried burdens that were never theirs. They believed every conflict was their responsibility to solve. Every broken person became another mission. Every painful relationship became another opportunity to prove that love could heal anything. They exhausted themselves trying to rescue people who were unwilling to rescue themselves. The more they gave, the more they believed they should continue giving. It became a cycle with no ending, because there was always another problem, another excuse, another promise that things would eventually change. Then one day, clarity quietly replaced guilt. The empath realized a simple but life-changing truth. Helping someone is very different from carrying them. You can offer support without sacrificing your own peace. You can care deeply without becoming responsible for another person's choices. You can love someone sincerely while accepting that their healing is a journey only they can choose to take. Imagine standing beside someone who has fallen into deep water. You can extend your hand and invite them to climb out. But if they refuse every attempt to save themselves, jumping into the water beside them only creates two people who are drowning. Wisdom is knowing the difference between offering help and losing yourself in another person's refusal to change. This realization changes the empath forever. They no longer chase people who continuously walk away. They stop arguing with those committed to misunderstanding them. They no longer feel responsible for fixing every broken relationship or healing every wounded heart. Instead, they begin investing their energy where there is mutual effort, honesty, and respect. Their kindness remains, but it is no longer available to those who repeatedly abuse it. Naturally, some people dislike this transformation. Those who once relied on the empath's endless availability suddenly feel abandoned. They mistake healthy distance for rejection because they had grown comfortable with unlimited access. But what they call coldness is often nothing more than self-respect. The empath is no longer reacting from guilt, fear, or emotional obligation. They are responding with wisdom. Detachment is not closing your heart. It is refusing to allow your heart to become a prison. It means loving without attachment to outcomes, giving without expecting control, and walking away without carrying hatred. The empath still wishes people well. They simply understand that peace sometimes requires distance. They no longer confuse staying with healing or suffering with love. This is not the end of compassion. It is compassion guided by discernment. The empath still forgives, but they no longer invite repeated betrayal. They still care, but they no longer abandon themselves to prove it. They still love, but now their love includes themselves as well. Because true awakening begins when an empath learns that protecting their own peace is not cruelty, it is wisdom. As emotional maturity grows, the empath discovers one final lesson that changes everything. They cannot save everyone. For years, they believed that enough patience, enough love, or enough sacrifice could heal even the most broken people. But human psychology reveals a difficult truth. No one changes until they choose to change. You can inspire someone, support them, and stand beside them, but you cannot live their life or make their decisions for them. Many empaths exhaust themselves trying to rescue people who have become comfortable repeating the same destructive patterns. They mistake responsibility for compassion, carrying burdens that were never theirs to carry. In doing so, they slowly lose their own peace, while waiting for someone else to become the person they hope they will be. The awakened empath finally understands that love should never require abandoning yourself. They stop forcing solutions on those who reject them. They stop chasing people who continue running from accountability. Instead, they offer kindness where it is welcomed and step away where it is repeatedly ignored. This does not mean giving up on people. It means respecting their freedom as much as your own. Every person has the right to choose their path, even if it leads to difficult consequences. Wisdom is knowing when your presence helps someone grow and when it only enables them to remain the same. Because the greatest act of compassion is helping others without losing yourself in the process. In the end, the final stage of awakening is not becoming someone who no longer loves. It is becoming someone who finally loves with wisdom. The empath does not lose their compassion, kindness, or gentle heart. Those qualities remain exactly where they have always been. What changes is the way they are given. Love is no longer offered out of guilt, fear, or the desperate need to be accepted. It is offered freely, with discernment, self-respect, and inner peace. Human psychology teaches that the healthiest people are not those who give everything away, but those who understand balance. They know when to stay and when to walk away. They know when to forgive and when to let go. They know that protecting their own well-being is not selfish. It is the foundation that allows them to continue loving without becoming emotionally exhausted. There will always be people who misunderstand this transformation. Some will say you have changed. Others will claim you have become distant. Let them think what they want. They only remember the version of you that placed everyone else's needs above your own. They cannot understand the peace that comes from finally choosing yourself without regret. When you stop seeking approval, set healthy boundaries, release the need to rescue everyone, and learn to love without losing yourself, something extraordinary happens. You no longer live in survival mode. You live with clarity. Your kindness becomes stronger because it is no longer driven by fear. Your heart remains open, but your mind is finally awake. Because the day an empath chooses self-respect over self-sacrifice is the day they become truly free.